which brings up what I call Bettis math. In his letter to Mount Viney's landowners, he claims there's only $363,000 of construction expenses left to complete the new section. And yet, according to records obtained through the office of the clerk of the court, he owes the prior contractor $661,600 and change for construction expenses already completed. Now, I didn't go to Harvard Law School, but I did pass second grade math, and that's over $1 million. At all times, this is a quote from him, at all times have we conformed with the requirements of Edgefield County as they were laid out to us. I don't believe that's true. Why? Because the law is always laid out in front of you. And it clearly states that the infrastructure must be completed before the first lot is sold. Or a performance bond or similar security must be posted equal to 150% of the value of the infrastructure cost. Does a building inspector or county administrator have the authority to overturn that law? That's something you guys need to answer. Now, Ranger's favorite ploy of misdirection is to point out that no one in the county administration ever asked him to post that bond. I spent a considerable amount of time going through several files, Office Clerk of the Court, Mr. Pettigrew's files, and the Building and Planning Commission files. There is absolutely no evidence to support that claim. There's no letter of exemption, there's no internal memo exempting him from the law, and there aren't any handwritten notes in the margin of the plat. If any of you have a letter of exemption, I would certainly like to see it. Now, don't expect Rainsford to admit that he knew of the law despite his claim of exemption. You might want to ask him or yourself, why is that? On the other hand, he really can't admit that he was unaware of the law either. Why is that? I find it very hard to believe that a guy who holds himself out to be a legal expert wouldn't do a remedial amount of research prior to developing any property, much less one the size and scope of Mount Vintage, to see what the zoning and restrictions are. That's kind of real estate 101 where I come from. Have you ever heard him say he was unaware of the law, or only that no one ever told him about it? There is a major difference between those two statements. Now, put all that aside for a moment. At the last council meeting, I believe, and I think most people would believe, that we made him acutely aware of the law. What has he done in the past 30 days to comply with it? Has he posted the required performance bond? Has he completed the infrastructure? Not on the infrastructure, at least. But just in case you missed it, we still don't have water, we still don't have sewer, and we don't have storm drains at work, and no moving van in the world would dare come down that cow path. Rainsford testified at the last council meeting, we have done everything the county asked us to do. If he's so concerned about complying with county requirements, why hasn't he made an effort to comply with the law? It's been there for years, even more years than I've been waiting to move into my own house. The law exists to protect people like us from developers like him that ignore their legal obligations. Since he refuses to complete the infrastructure in accordance with the existing law, I'm just shining a spotlight on his false promises and his incompetence. I don't really care what he says, I care what he does. The last council meeting, he blamed most of his troubles on a lousy economy. Where did the $40 to $60 million go that he sold in 2005 and 2006 that was supposed to fund the infrastructure in the new section before he sold the first lot? And now, the foreclosure document discloses that he took out a $7 million loan just days after he completed the two best years of sales in 2005 and 2006, estimated between $40 and $60 million. Why would you need a loan for $7 million when you just completed $60 million worth of sales? You sure didn't put it in the infrastructure. If the economy's so lousy, why are there 19 homes under construction in Mount Vintage? That's his number, not mine. At the Homeowners Association, he told us there were 19 homes under construction at the end of the year. If the economy's so lousy, why are 93% of Americans still working and paying their bills? If the economy is so lousy, why did Cooper Place start development at the precise time Rainsford claims the bottom fell out of the economy? And it's my understanding that Cooper Place was financed. And I believe Rainsford said he couldn't find any financing. One thing this is for the residents here. states in his letter to Mount Vintage landowners, and I quote, "We called him to dissuade him from going to the county council and let him know that we thought his action would hurt property values of all owners at Mount Vintage," unquote. That's a lie. We never called me. Talmadge called me. And I won't tell you what we talked about because it's confidential, but we did not talk about Mount Vintage, and we did not talk about property values. I tell you this because the council needs to know not the content of a letter or phone conversation, but rather to illustrate the content of his character. Now, not to complicate things, I don't really want to do this, but I have to, Edgefield has another ordinance under Title 15, Section 154, which requires action by the developer pertaining to erosion and sediment control and stormwater management plan. A plan which fully indicates necessary land management and treatment measures, including a timetable of the schedule for their installation, which will effectively minimize soil erosion and sedimentation, and which will provide for the successful management of stormwater. The initial development of residential subdivisions is not exempt from the provisions of this chapter. All construction work, road, sewer, lot grading, etc., done to establish a residential subdivision for the construction of single-family residences on individual lots shall comply with the provisions of this chapter. Shall is a legal term in contract law. May is, I'll do it if I want to. Shall means you have to. Use temporary plant cover, mulching, sediment basins, silt traps, or other structures to control runoff, protect areas subject to erosion, and remove heavy sediment loads from runoff. That's in part what the ordinance says. For the past 2.5 years, there has been no erosion control, temporary or permanent, along Utah Springs Trail, which is except for 200 feet of silt fence at the far east end, which has breached several times, dumping tons of mud and silt under the road, not to mention the rest of the 1.25 miles of Utah Springs without any erosion control, and the hundreds of tons of mud and silt on the road and in the wetlands. And, oh, by the way, the ordinance goes on in a section for penalty. Any person who willfully violates the provisions of this chapter shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor and upon conviction shall be imprisoned for not more than 6 months or fined not more than $1,000 or both. Maybe he should clear his calendar. The lack of erosion control by Grainsford is so severe that it is common to find 4 to 12 inches of mud and silt in the road from the adjacent right-of-way, resulting in nearly impossible conditions. And while I continue on for a moment, I'll share these with you. These are pictures taken 2 days ago. Compounding the silting in the road, there are several areas along the right-of-way that had fissures several feet deep and 1 to 2 feet wide where rains had washed away the topsoil either onto the road or into the wetlands, and every time it rains, the silt gets worse. I took Mr. Ashcraft on a tour yesterday and pointed these things out, and so you can consult him for confirmation of that. So instead of scraping the dirt and silt off the road and placing it back on the right-of-way where it came from, what does he do? He brings in 76 more truckloads of dirt from a private contractor and dumps them on the right-of-way, and put another 25 loads of dirt from a stockpile and dump them on the right-of-way to replace the silt that's already in the road and not replaced. The cost to constantly repair the road where it completely washes out under the curb, flush out the sewer system 3 times in 8 weeks or so, regrade the road multiple times, haul in 76 truckloads of dirt, plus another 25 from a stockpile, rent a bulldozer, pay the labor cost to spread the 76 loads of dirt, replace the repair pumps in the lift stations that have been totally neglected for a year, sitting in 5 feet of water and silt, clean out the countless storm drains that are 3 to 5 deep and have been completely filled up with silt to the top of the manhole covers, and countless other missteps will likely exceed what the initial cost to pay the road would have been 8 months ago. So here's how I see the situation. You essentially, as a council, have 2 choices. And what are the consequences of each? You have to ask yourself. One, I'll give you a hint, though. One of the choices you don't have is that you'll be permitted to sit on the sidelines and be a spectator. This is my last this is my last presentation to the council on this matter. Finally, I want to apologize. I want to apologize to the people of Mount Vintage for burdening them with this issue. All I ever wanted to do was build our retirement home, move into it,